Dr. Graham Hill is a criminologist and former senior investigating officer with the Surrey Police. During his career, Graham worked to solve some of the UK's most high-profile and infamous crimes, including the murder of Millie Dowler and the London Night Stalker Delroy Grant.
Someone has to be in charge. Someone has to bring the investigation towards its ultimate conclusion.
Graham, who specialises in child abduction and murder, assisted the Portuguese police in the investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. In this series, he's using his own insider knowledge and expertise to unpack the investigation from the inside out.
The public only ever sees the tip of the iceberg. I want to tell the full story and reveal how detectives brought a series of elusive killers to justice.
This is Murder Detective.
Battersea in South London is famous for its cats and dogs home. It's also famous for its power station, whose now redundant chimneys dominate the skyline.
Battersea about 5 or 10 years ago was not as affluent as it is today. The power station was there, it had been closed down for many, many years, and the area was a little bit run down. Now, however, it's been gentrified, it's upmarket, property is hugely expensive, and it's a nice and desirable place to live.
Well, the whole of Battersea now is really a really proper cosmopolitan area. I know they say it about London generally, but certainly Battersea, because it's right over the river from Chelsea, a lot of people prefer to live in Battersea because it's less crowded than most other places.
On the 4th of June 2019, Simon Kime had returned from Portugal and was on his way to meet his friend Adrian Murphy, who was moving into his flat.
He entered his flat and found Adrian there on a bed in the spare room, and it was quite clear to him that he was dead. Simon called for an ambulance, and the police were also notified and attended at the same time as the ambulance.
When I was calling the number, I looked on the coffee table and I saw a bottle of whiskey and a glass. I realised then, this is not straightforward. Someone else was in the flat, because Adrian never drinks whiskey.
The process when somebody calls 999 having found, unfortunately, our victim, first response would be by uniform officers from the local police station. They would arrive there, talk to the witness, make an assessment. Because those officers would not be able to give or find out a good reason as to why that person had died in those circumstances, it becomes an unexplained death, and it has to be investigated fully.
Dr. Graham Hill is on his way to Battersea to meet the Deputy Senior Investigating Officer on the case, Detective Neil Goodwin, to find out what exactly were the all-important first steps on attending the murder scene at Adrian Murphy's apartment.
Initially, the cause of Adrian's death was unknown, but the police became suspicious when they found that his credit card and laptop had been stolen from the flat.
Simon was able to tell the police that there were a number of items that he felt were missing, items of Adrian's possession that he would always be with. Most significantly, I would say he found that Adrian's mobile phone was in the toilet, and it appeared to be weighted down by like a can of Coke.
Neil, here we are outside the flats where Adrian's body was found. Can you tell us what happened in the first 24 hours of the investigation?
First 24 hours, we know that Simon called the ambulance, and as a matter of procedure from the ambulance service, they put this on to the police, and police would have dispatched some uniform officers to attend with the ambulance.
So the uniform officers call in local CID. Local CID lock down the scene and call in scenes of crime. And scenes of crime do an examination of the area, and they find a significant piece of evidence during that examination. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
They found their mobile phone down the toilet with the coke can on top of it, which is weighing it down. So they found that and they took that away. And that's because the water could damage the phone. So that was taken straight away. But the rest of the scene was shut down for now, pending the results from the special post-mortem. The local CID would have come down to the area, come down to the scene, made further inquiries from there.
To understand more about Adrian's death, police needed to build up a profile of him, which meant talking to those closest to him. First and foremost, members of his bereaved family.
Adrian was born the youngest of 9 children. We're from a very small house in Kilkenny. With the amount of children in it and parents, space was kind of limited, so everybody was in everyone else's business. But Adrian got the most space because he was into dancing. And he was into Irish dancing, which he did day and night, from when he got up in the morning till when he went to bed at night.
He had been 7 times Irish dance champion, and at the time of his death, he held the post of choreographer at the Royal Academy of Dance. Everyone describes him as being the life and soul of the party. He was much loved, he was full of energy. He was a real, kind, gentle, wonderful person.
He left Kilkenny in 1996, from where he moved to the US for a short stint, and from there he moved to New Zealand, where his whole career exploded as he has his own dance company out there, and he had his own huge dance productions, including a big show, Feet of Fire. I suppose he just wanted a fresh start. New Zealand is probably a bit like Ireland, was small, and he was so well known there, he decided that the UK is a big pond and it would be big into the Irish dance, and that he was, and he decided to move there for new opportunities. He started his own shows and productions, first of all, in Wales and in London and different parts of London, and he gave lessons in the Royal Academy of Dance. He had a very strong social life. There was 2 Adrians. There was the social side of Adrian and then the work side. When Adrian was working and had a production or a show coming up, he wouldn't even answer the phone to you. But when Adrian was off, Adrian was off. And Adrian being off meant he was socialising with everybody and anybody.
Once police had established Adrian's lifestyle and social patterns, they then needed to put together a timeline of his last movements on the night he died.
When we searched the address, we seized certain items such as the phone and the coke can in the toilet, and we dusted for fingerprints. And the scenes of crime officer could identify that there was a fingerprint on the glass, and he was able to take a quick fingerprint from that, which he could send off later to the National Fingerprint Database.
At this point, this is a pivotal moment in the case. You've got a fingerprint on the glass, you've matched the fingerprint to a suspect, and although the fingerprint doesn't say that that suspect killed Adrian, but it certainly says that someone was present maybe when he passed away.
Yeah, this is massive, and at this point the decision was made to give this investigation to my homicide team.
So local CID hand over to the homicide team.
That's right.
And that's where you work.
Yes.
And from that moment on, you and your team start to investigate this particular crime.
Exactly that, yes.
With the case being handed to Neil Goodwin and the homicide team, this has now been deemed a suspicious death. Will a single fingerprint be enough to catch a killer and see justice served? June 2019. Police in South London were beginning an investigation into the suspicious death of Irish choreographer and dancer Adrian Murphy. With exclusive insider access, Graham Hill is looking at how Deputy SIO Neil Goodwin got to grips with the investigation from its earliest days. Neil and his team have a fingerprint match taken from the crime scene that's about to provide the first breakthrough in the case.
11th of June was when the investigation team received news that the fingerprint came back to a male named Joel O'Say. Osei has a previous criminal record and he'd previously served time in prison for drug offences. So we had his fingerprints on our record, so when our fingerprint bureau compared that fingerprint that was taken from the whiskey glass, they were to match it directly to Joel Osei.
Joel appeared to come from quite a nice family, but his parents had understandably had washed their hands of him. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with Joel. Quite often in these cases, parents will try and help their children, or at least sort of give them support and backup. I can only imagine that they were aware of his scheming and his illegal activities and wanted nothing more to do with Joel.
In Joel Osei, police had established a key person of interest who had been with Adrian shortly before he died. But before they could start to build a case against him, they needed to establish a cause of death for Adrian with an official autopsy.
In the post-mortem, the pathologist, he tried to establish the cause of Adrian's death. He did notice that Adrian had a heart problem, had heart disease, and this could have been a cause of his death. However, he didn't want to rule out anything else, and so he took toxicology samples, which included blood and urine and other things as well, and we were able to take those samples and send them off to a laboratory to be able to conduct some analysis to try and find out what was in his blood.
One of the main investigative strands in this case was closed-circuit television. The first thing there with the CCTV is to eliminate people, and in that elimination you will then focus down on your suspects, and that's what happened in this case, and very quickly a suspect is identified.
So this is good quality footage from the lift in the apartment block where Adrian Murphy lived.
Yes, that's right, yeah, really good footage here. Very lucky to have such good footage. So here on the left you've got Joel Osei. He was 25 years old at the time.
So you see him go in. Talk us through what we're seeing here.
Yes, what we can see is him, he's empty-handed, as you can see, he's coming in, and he's not carrying anything. So he's now faced with a wall of many different floors to pick to where to know. So he walks in and he's looking at the buttons for each floor. He doesn't know what floor Adrian lives on.
So he's just got a number of an apartment.
He's got a number of an apartment, and you can see that he's pressing multiple floors. And as we go through this footage, you'll see that he steps out the lift to check on a number of occasions, like this one here,
yeah,
to see what flat numbers he's at before pressing up.
So he's working his way up the building.
Working his way up, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so finally he's found the right floor.
Yeah, so you can deduce from that he has found the right floor, come out, look to the left where Adrian's flat is.
Yeah.
He kind of gives that expression like, I'm finally here.
Yeah.
So this here is Joel Osei in the lift, having left Adrian's flat.
Okay.
As you can see from the reflection of the side of the elevator here,
yeah,
he's got a Louis Vuitton bag in his hand.
Okay.
A large Louis Vuitton holder.
Even as they studied the CCTV footage, police were still waiting on news of exactly how Adrian had died. As they awaited the results of the toxicology report from Adrian's autopsy, they came across another case with striking similarities to Adrian Murphy's.
There was another case involving a male that we can only refer to as AB. He's a protected witness and we wouldn't want to give out his identity. This is 2 days before the attack on Adrian Murphy on the 30th of May 2019. AB was living in the Walthamstow area at the time. He was using the Grindr app, and at some time in the morning, perhaps about 11 o'clock, he linked up with Joel Osei on Grindr. Although Joel Osei was using a different name, he was using the name Remy, but it had a picture of him on his profile, which AB liked, and they agreed to meet up at AB's house.
Grindr is an online dating app. It's where gay men go to meet others for hookups. It's also sometimes used by masseurs and escorts to advertise their services. But mostly it's just for gay men to meet each other.
On the 30th of May 2019, only 2 days before Adrian Murphy's suspicious death, Joel Osei and AB, having initially made contact on Grindr, met for the first time.
Through the course of the investigation, we discovered that it appeared that Joel was targeting specific people on Grindr who appeared to be quite wealthy gay men. When Joel arrived at the address, it believes that AB was expecting sort of sexual contact to happen quite quickly, and was surprised that Joel didn't seem particularly interested in this, and he tried various things like sort of massaging Joel's feet, kissing him, but things weren't progressing as AB was expecting.
AB felt that in real life Joel Osei was much colder than he had been over text messages, and their sort of date, if you like, wasn't going very well. AB went to the bathroom and came back out, and Joel Osei presented him with a glass of an orange drink, which he assumed to be orange juice, which he drank straight away without thinking anything of it.
And the next thing AB remembers after drinking the orange juice was coming up and the ambulance staff were around.
Within 5 minutes, he explained to the police that his legs suddenly felt like they were in concrete, but his body felt shaky, and he suddenly lost consciousness, falling down immediately where he was. The next thing he remembers is waking up in hospital the next day, rigged up to all sorts of drips and life support systems. Apparently, he's very close to dying from what he was given by Joel Osei. We decided to link these two investigations. We felt there's enough similarities in the two, and the fact that the same telephone number was used to be able to link the two investigations.
Now, there was another piece of CCTV that you were able to capture in relation to AB's offence. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We can see on CCTV that Osei was empty-handed when he went into AB's apartment, and then when he left a short while later, we can track him on the same CCTV, then carrying a number of different bags which appear to be full of AB's belongings. We were fortunate to be able to find the end of that journey in the local area in Tottenham, and we can see him on other CCTV footage from shops and other establishments in that area with close-up images of him carrying a number of bags which included property belonging to AB.
Police now began to build a case around Joel Osei, and they quickly discovered that he was not operating alone. It appeared he had a female accomplice, a juvenile offender called Diana Christea, who was just 17 years old and living in a children's home in the Tottenham area.
Joel and Diana met on a train a couple of years previously to this incident happening. Diana was sort of around the age of 16, just turning 16, so she was very young. And Joel was in his 20s, several years older than her. Diana, clearly a vulnerable young lady, and was in and out of care. She had quite a tricky family upbringing and was clearly a sort of a troubled young lady.
Crucially, police were able to establish that at the time of Osei's attack on AB on the 30th of May, Diana Christea was close by.
We can also see that Diana Christea was in the area at the same time, and we can only conclude from that and the phone data that we were able to analyse that they eventually met up. And a little while later we could show them together in that area, purchasing items using AB's cards.
It was at this point that Neil and his team made their move. Not only did they feel that they had identified their two prime suspects, but it was also crucial to keep the local community safe from the two potential predators.
We first arrested Diana Christea, and she was arrested for murder of Adrian Murphy. The hunt for Joel Osei continued into the early hours of the morning, and we eventually caught him in the early hours of the 12th of June. Both suspects answered all questions, no comment. They were both interviewed twice, and to everything it was no comment.
But the police had a major problem. Bringing in the two suspects was a swift success for Neil and his homicide team, but retaining them in police custody was another matter.
At that stage, we didn't have enough to charge either of them, certainly with the murder of Adrian Murphy. Maybe we could have had a theft offence that we could have charged for, but effectively we didn't have enough, and we needed to continue our investigation to be able to build a bigger evidential picture on both of them. So both parties were released on bail.
If you have a person that you suspect of an offence but you don't have the evidence to charge them at that point, they can be granted police bail, and you can attach conditions to it. Generally what will happen with that, the custody sergeant may impose a condition of bail that they live at certain premises, that they report to police at intervals, for instance. But that doesn't mean that that person is under 24-hour surveillance. If they want to disappear, they're going to disappear.
A massive concern was that they could just run, and we tried to put steps in place to prevent this from happening. But also there's the real prospect that they could carry on doing what they're doing and do this to other people. And this was something we were desperately worried about, but we were not able to progress this as quickly as possible because of our reliance on getting back the toxicology results.
Without conclusive toxicology evidence, Neil and his homicide team turned their attention to Joel Osei and Diana Christea's last known movements in the hours leading up to victim Adrian Murphy's death. And they were about to get a breakthrough. In Battersea, South London, Graham Hill is meeting the detectives who are investigating the June 2019 murder of Adrian Murphy, a professional dancer and choreographer who died in mysterious circumstances after an evening with a man he'd met through the gay dating app Grindr. After arresting and questioning the man Murphy had met that evening, Joel Osei and his 17-year-old alleged accomplice, Diana Christea, police officers were forced to release them on bail due to lack of evidence.
In my experience, there are some really key risky decisions that have to be made during an investigation of this type. And I think one of the decisions that struck me was that after the arrest of Osei and Christea, they looked at the evidence. They asked CPS whether there was enough evidence for them to charge them as a holding charge for theft. And actually, the CPS said no. So they were forced to release both people. What that meant is that they were potentially letting two people that they thought may have killed someone back onto the streets. Now that's a risky decision because those people could abscond and never be seen again, or they could go and commit another serious crime. And that could be really difficult to explain away if they'd have gone and done this to someone else and that person had died.
On tracking Joel Osei's movements in the weeks leading up to the attacks in May and June 2019, they discovered he had had a run-in with the police just days earlier.
On that occasion, he had attended a music festival known as the We Are Festival. He was searched by security, found in possession of a knife and a large quantity of white pills. They were subsequently found out to be caffeine pills, so perhaps his purpose was to skank festival goers. But his mobile phone was seized in that investigation, and we took on that mobile phone and we downloaded that mobile phone.
Whilst at that festival, they were concerned with how this was going when he'd been stopped with security, and Joel had relayed this to Diana, and Diana said, "It's not a problem, don't worry, we've got your Grindr finesse," which we believed was the Grindr scam that they were planning with AB and Mr. Murphy, who they've probably not identified at this point. And Diana uses the phrase "batty boys," which we took to mean gay men that he would meet on Grindr.
So we could see their text message conversations back then. The text messages between the two were discussing an idea they had concocted together, which was to finesse people on Grindr. Finesse is a term that we weren't immediately familiar with, but we searched it on open sources and Urban Dictionary alike, and finesse is to rob or to steal from somebody.
The arrest at the festival the previous week appeared to affect a move by Joel Osei and Diana Christea into a different criminal direction, that of targeting men with money on online dating platforms.
In his profile had included the words "massages given." Adrian loved having massages. As far as I'm concerned, Adrian was the innocent party. He hadn't deliberately put himself in danger. He just wanted a massage, and that's all he wanted to get out of inviting this guy over. Adrian wasn't into sex. He said I'd rather go shopping for shoes than have sex. That was always one of his phrases, and I believe it's true.
I think one of the striking things about these circumstances is that this is not a crime that was directed against the homosexual and the gay community. This is pure evil. This is just predatory. And they're using the vulnerabilities and the trust that the gay community, the LGBT community have within themselves, that confidence that's grown with the openness that's now here today, unfortunately does create openings for predators.
They worked on the theory that they were targeting a very vulnerable group of people, and that the vulnerability of that group of people would potentially stop them reporting to the police what happened. And I think that was the premise that they built the whole scam around.
This killing was not motivated by homophobia. The motivation was financial gain. Osei and Christia knew that quite a lot of men who use online dating apps are in the closet.
Eyewitnesses saw Diana sell these items from outside her address. She was in quite a small care home, and Diana was regularly going missing and coming to their attention a lot, and so they had a very close eye on Diana. They noticed that, for example, she returned home with quite a large bag and questioned her on that, and her response was, "Oh, it's my boyfriend Joel's, he's moving house today." For her, quite strangely, she was selling them from outside of her address, and this was caught by the staff.
Not only did Joel Osei and Diana Christea sell the items they had stolen, they also used Adrian Murphy's credit card.
Foolishly for Joel and Diana, Joel has taken bank cards belonging to AB and Mr. Murphy and has used them in shops, and Diana has also used them in shops.
Perhaps this is considered to be a tester to see if they can use the card. Perhaps they were trying a small transaction to be able to see what else they could do with it, because later that day they also purchased hotel rooms in the sort of London area to lay low, but also they purchased some architectural software for a computer valued at $2,995, and a PayPal account was set up in Adrian's name on one of his cards, and through that PayPal account they had tried to purchase over $80,000 worth of diamonds from America. The transaction was unsuccessful because of the money laundering procedures that PayPal have adopted.
Detectives were forming a clear digital trail of Osei and Christea's reckless behaviour. But whilst they had ample evidence linking the pair to the selling of stolen goods, they still needed hard evidence linking them to the method used to incapacitate AB and murder Adrian Murphy. But Neil Goodwin and his team were about to receive a phone call from prime suspect Diana Christea that would prove to be a breakthrough.
They had a very up and down relationship, and they had one of their many arguments subsequently following Diana and Joel's arrest. And Diana then makes a phone call to police, and that phone call to police was pivotal in this case.
Graham Hill is looking into the complex murder case of professional dancer and choreographer Adrian Murphy in Battersea in June 2019. Through painstaking detective work, the investigative team have identified the prime suspect Joel Osei, whom Adrian had met on Grindr, and Osei's 17-year-old accomplice Diana Christea. But though they had clear evidence linking the pair to stolen items from Murphy's flat, they still didn't have enough evidence to charge him with murder. But then detectives got the break they needed. They got a phone call. It was from Christea herself, and in it she explained how Osei had incapacitated his victims with a very specific drug called scopolamine.
Scopolamine is a very unusual drug in the UK. Nobody on the investigation team had ever heard of scopolamine. It's not something that is tested for in this country and is extremely unusual. And scopolamine in tiny doses is found in some medications, sort of real trace amounts. However, it's not recreationally used because it is so dangerous, and it is used in countries sort of like Colombia to knock their victims out, whether to rape them or to rob them of their belongings.
Scopolamine is a compound that can be manufactured in the lab. It can also be found in nature, in various plants. It's primarily a motion sickness tablet, and it can be found in forms of tablets or patches.
The really sinister thing about scopolamine is the way it dissolves into your system, leaving no trace. It's for this reason that it's known colloquially as devil's breath. It won't show up on any standard toxicology report. So had police not received the phone call from Diana Christea, they might never have known what had killed Adrian Murphy.
Initially, we sent up for our regular toxicology, which includes a whole host of drugs used in crime, as well as recreational drugs as well. This is not a quick process to get toxicology. Scopolamine isn't one of these drugs that are searched for or tested for. So at that time, when we submitted our drugs, we were not looking for that scopolamine. So we were then able to update what we were looking for from our toxicology point of view. This made the scientists search for scopolamine in his blood and urine.
This trial and this case really hinged on the specialisms and the expertise of forensic scientists and forensic pathologists. The forensic pathologist was unable to say why Adrian Murphy died. Therefore, it was a mystery.
But just as it seemed they were on the verge of solving that mystery, an unexpected mishap occurred which could have sent them back to square one.
They came back to us with information that the vial of blood that we sent off to them had broken, and our hearts sank, feeling like we'd missed our only opportunity to find out what was in his blood. However, it just so happens that the crime scene manager that attended that post-mortem has had experience in dealing with such similar cases in the past, and he makes it his own little extra procedure, if you like, to take an extra sample of blood, which we were then able to send back up to the forensic laboratory for testing. They came back to us and they were able to tell us that there was scopolamine found in the blood and the urine, and later they were able to tell us that scopolamine was present in the Coke can and another glass tumbler that was in the address.
Quick thinking of the toxicologist rescued the all-important blood sample from the crime scene, and with scopolamine now clearly showing up, police have enough evidence to arrest and charge their two prime suspects, Joel Osei and Diana Christea.
Police then rearrested Diana and Joel. She said that she'd not been involved in the case and that it was all Joel. However, when police got her into the formal interview, she made a no comment to all questions, so to try not to incriminate themselves. However, for Joel and Diana, the damage was already done by the phone call that Diana had made. Joel goes to prison and he's held on remand awaiting his trial. I've applied for what we describe as the OPT data, which is the prison communication data. Joel likes to talk, and he was in a lot of communication with Diana, and there are letters back and forward between them where Joel describes her as his Romanian goddess wife, and they plan how they're going to have a family together and they're going to get married, and all these great grand plans. Now this all changes quite suddenly. This time, Diana's tone really changes on the letter. She's very upset and angry that she's been charged with the murder and understandably worried at the consequences of what's going to happen.
With the case headed for trial, one major issue was still causing the police problems. To secure a murder conviction rather than manslaughter, they needed to be able to demonstrate exactly how Joel Osei had got hold of the scopolamine and administered it to his victims.
One important aspect we had to
prove was that it was actually Joel Osei that administered the drug to his victims rather than the victims having taken the drug willfully.
Crucially, it was the data collected from their mobile phones and their internet searches that revealed the most damning evidence.
They've had to put a lot of research in, a lot of time and effort in to find scopolamine on the internet, and also a way of bringing it in, and that was hidden under a broccoli extract. That's how it was brought in.
The trial was held in Croydon because of COVID restrictions rather than the Old Bailey. Moreover, only family and legal representatives were permitted to attend.
Both suspects sat in the box, hardly said a word, hardly looked anywhere other than straight forward. They just sat there like this for the 4 weeks. They didn't look anywhere else. Diana sometimes had periods where she looked upset, but Joel Osei had nothing but steel eyes facing forward.
Myself and my wife went to court for the full month, which was harrowing. It was the very start of the lockdown from the coronavirus, so we were very lucky to make it over there, but court itself was very tough. It was a long 4 weeks, and we heard some stuff that you don't want to hear, especially like it is. It's very hard to sit there and know the character who Adrian was, and you have legal people representing these two others who actually killed Adrian, and they're portraying their people in a good light, and we're showing Adrian in a bad light, which there was absolutely no truth in it. Now, we realise they have a job to do, but it's very hard to sit there and have a person like Adrian's character taken apart.
Joel had been on the stand for quite some time, fielding questions from the prosecuting barrister, and he'd also had some questions from his own barrister as well. And then the final barrister questioning him was Diana's barrister. And Diana's barrister was going through the timeline of events, and Joel was sticking to this story that he'd concocted where they just met up for a hookup, and that he didn't administer drugs to anybody, he didn't spike any drinks, he was simply there to provide services to these males, and that they didn't have any money to pay him, and so that they said, well, take our belongings instead. I mean, it was an amazing, far-fetched story, one that I'd heard whilst monitoring these phone calls, so we were aware of what he was going to say. He'd been reading law books, he'd been studying the case papers incessantly, and had planned this story that he was going to say at court, and was doing well with the story.
But Osei hadn't reckoned with the lawyers for his accomplice, who knew that their client's best hope was to distance herself from Osei, who, as the older and more experienced operator, could clearly be painted as the more culpable.
One of the barristers got up and she exposed a story about Osei that he had other girlfriends outside of Diana Christia, and then Diana Christia decided to turn on him, which happened in the dock. It was like something you'd see in a movie. It was just unreal, and the whole case turned in a matter of 5 sentences.
Diana's barrister then produces these notes that Joel has handed to Diana whilst they're both in the dock at court, and it's telling Diana what to say when she was given evidence.
And she said, "Can you explain these to Joel Osei?" And Joel Osei's eyes and demeanour just sunk immediately. He looked a beaten man.
He then said, "Yes, I've been lying the whole time." And it was an open-mouthed moment in court. It was just the most shocking, incredible moment I've ever had in court. And the whole court just turned to look at him with open-mouthed. And she then immediately said, "No further questions."
He had to admit what he had done, and he had to admit all the lies he had told. And that spun the whole case around. The one thing I will give Osei, he did admit, I'm sorry about this, Adrian Murphy was a really nice guy. He had showed me courteous, and he had whatever. He said, and I have told lies. He wasn't doing anything wrong when I poisoned him.
He went along the lines that he didn't mean to cause serious harm to Mr. Murphy.
If Joel and Diana hadn't planned on killing Adrian Murphy but incapacitating him, as they had their previous victim, AB, how and why did he die? One theory is they had read the dosage incorrectly.
In the metric system, we have grams, then smaller milligrams, and then we have micrograms. So the tab motion sickness tablets, they're in micrograms, 1,000,000 times smaller than your gram. The difference between a microgram, a milligram, and a gram, to visualize, obviously, it would be comparing a mouse, a big tiger, and an elephant.
With their case proven in court and murder convictions safely delivered, the team reflects on their efforts.
When you've put hours and hours and hours, you literally spend weeks, months of your life on this case to then get this moment where he's admitted to this offence, and then you get the guilty verdict, it just relief for yourselves and vindication for all the hard work you've put in.
Osei was sentenced to 32 years imprisonment, and Christia was sentenced to 16 years imprisonment, but the judge made it clear that had she not been under the age of 18 at the time these offences were committed, that she would have got a bigger and more substantial sentence.
One of the only good things to come out of this trial and sentence is that those killers were taken off the streets. Had they remained free, they almost certainly would have killed again. So, for the term of their sentence, people are safe from their malicious conspiracies to murder.
They're just predators. That's all they are. Unfeeling, unthinking predators.
Every single day I think of Adrian. It could be a sound, it could be someone dancing on television, and things like that. I just suddenly burst into tears. Every single day I think of Adrian, and I think I always will. I miss him so much.
He has left a huge void behind him. And even at his funeral, flowers came from every corner of the world. They came from Australia, New Zealand, different parts of Europe, different parts of the States. The outpouring of grief was unreal. Even now, on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death at Christmas, we get loads of messages. People just, they can't believe he's gone because he was such a larger-than-life character. When he's not there, you actually know he's not there. So he was brilliant. He was brilliant to my parents. He was brilliant to everybody. He's loved all his nephews and nieces. At every opportunity, Adrian wanted to come back to Kilkenny, back to visit his parents and all his friends. So as much as he was worldly known and worldly travelled, home was where his heart was. And now we're happy that after everything we went through, we have him back with his parents.
I think there's no doubt in my mind, having looked at this investigation, having spoken to people that worked on the investigation, this was a difficult, complex investigation that was well managed, led in a particular way by a very strong SIO, and did some groundbreaking work in terms of identifying the drug, identifying the killers, and bringing them to justice. So all in all, a really good piece of police work.